guys, I'm Saumya and I'm back again with another video. So I hope you are all well and I hope you're all safe. So in today's video, I'm going to be talking about my 10 best reading habits that I feel have been very beneficial for me. So I just want to share them with you all in today's video. Please do not forget to leave a comment about which habit do you think is the best one, and if you have your own reading habits, I will look forward to your comments. And finally, you can follow me on my Instagram, which is @booklover. So my first reading habit that has proven to be rather beneficial for me is that I do not pick up books to read based on their popularity. I mean, I do keep a tab on which books are getting popular with the readers, and I also pay attention to the new releases, but ultimately the books that I decide to read are the ones that interest me personally, even if they are not very new or popular. I do this especially with self-help books. I do not automatically go for best-selling self-help books. Rather than that, I go for those books that I feel talk about the things that I can benefit from in my personal life. That is precisely the reason why on my channel, when I make recommendation videos, I try to keep a variety of books so that everybody has something to choose from. Different people have different interests. So my second reading habit that I have adopted in 2020 itself is that instead of doing monthly TBRs, I am now doing yearly TBRs. If you do not know, TBR means to be read. So readers make TBRs or to be read lists for books that they want to read that are kind of on their priority list. So up until 2019, I used to make monthly TBRs because I used to prioritize certain books every month, but guess what, I could never fulfill those TBRs. Maybe out of 12 months, maybe 1 or 2 months used to be the ones where I was able to follow monthly TBRs, but for the most part I wasn't. So in 2020 I decided to ditch the monthly TBRs and do the yearly TBRs. The third reading habit that has been very beneficial for me is that whenever I do get into a reading slump, or whenever I do get into a situation where I am not able to read more than 5 or say more than 10 pages, I do not get discouraged. Instead, I do just that. I would read only 5 pages if that's what I'm able to manage. And guess what? If I continue doing that for like the next 10 days, it seems like nothing is happening. But in the next 10 days, I am done with 50 pages. And that means something. That is progress. Basically, my mantra with reading is that little progress is better than no progress. My next reading habit that I absolutely love is that I alternate between genres. For example, if I'm reading 2 books side by side, one would be fiction, the other one would be non-fiction. And I also do this when I'm finished reading a book. Suppose I'm finished reading a thriller, so my next choice would be romance. My next reading habit, or rather a bookish habit that I love, is that whenever I read a book that I especially feel connected to, I always write down the quotes from that book that move me the most. And I often revisit these quotes because it helps me remember the essence of the book. It helps me remember why I loved that book. When I read those quotes again, I kind of revisit the time when I had first read that book. And I think that's a rather sentimental habit, but I still love it. My next reading habit that I find very useful is that whenever I'm reading and I come across a word that I'm not familiar with, I look up its meaning. And because of this, I learn a new word, and also there is no confusion. So a lot of you have commented about this on my channel, that if you are reading and if you find a word and if you pause to look its meaning up, wouldn't it like disturb you? Now, hear it from my side, it doesn't disturb me, because I have grown up in a time when we didn't have smartphones. Whenever I used to read books back then, I used to have this big fat Cambridge dictionary that I would consult every time I would come across an unfamiliar word. I'm used to that. So from my perspective, an app that tells me the meaning just by typing the word, it's magic. So I do not feel like it's a waste of time or that it breaks my flow. I'm pretty sure a lot of you would relate to what I'm saying. Okay, so my next reading habit is that I practice quite frequently is that whenever I decide to explore the works of a new author, I always read 3 books by that author to decide whether this particular author is meant for me or not, whether his or her works are meant for me or not. It's okay for you to not love every book by an author. So it does happen sometimes that the first book that you read by an author turns out to be a miss for you. but the next one turns out to be a hit for you. So it's not the wisest thing to do for you to ditch the author simply because you didn't like one book by that author. The vice versa also happens, that the first book is a hit, the second one is a miss, and the third one is a hit. These things have happened with me. So I think any author deserves at least 3 chances from a reader. So my next reading habit has saved a lot of my time over the years, and this habit is that if I'm not able to get into a book, I do not force myself to read it, and I do not force myself to finish it. When I was growing up, I had this mindset that if I pick up a book, I'm obligated and duty bound to finish it. With my experience, I realized that no, my only duty is to have a good time while reading, and that's my priority. Actually, as a teenager, I used to follow certain people who used to propagate this, that if you pick up a book, you're supposed to finish it. With my experience, I realized that you do not need such rigidity. So yes, I find my next reading habit to be rather wholesome, and that is that I never compare my reading progress with another person. You see, if I start doing that, it will take all the enjoyment away, and I am not ready to forfeit my joy of reading owing to some petty comparisons. It can be any kind of comparison. It can be a comparison as regards the number of books that I've read, and it can be a comparison with respect to the number of pages that I read per hour. So I do not like doing such things. There have been times when I've read a lot more than a lot of people, and there have been times when I've read a lot less than a lot of people, and both the times it hasn't bothered me. And my final reading habit is that I never pretend that I have understood a book when I actually haven't, just so that I can sound like an intellectual, because for me it doesn't make sense. It's the opposite of being an intellectual, because when I admit that I do not understand a certain book, I can actually freely go up to somebody who did understand that book, and I can actually understand it correctly. Because once you pretend, you are not in a position where you can ask people about it, because then they'll be like, but you said you understood. Then what will you say? So it's better to own up. So these are my 10 reading habits that I feel have really benefited me. Now, the benefits that I've derived from these habits have not been immediately visible, but in my life, eventually they have added up and I have felt their rewards. Thank you for watching this video. If you want to connect with me on my social media, the links are in the description box. I'll see you in my next video. Till then, bye bye and take care.